So I got some sweet basil from Lowe's. This was actually the best looking plant of what was left, and I'm going to tell you all about how to transplant them, separating them with the root ball intact, and some tips that I practice to care for basil. So I'm just kind of looking over the plant. You can see that the roots are coming out of the end a little bit. It's definitely ready to be split, transplanted into a bigger pot so that it can grow. The leaves were in pretty bad shape. It looked like they maybe had got too much sun. Basil needs about 6 to 8 hours of sun, but be sure that there is a part of the day whenever your basil is able to get some shade as well. It's something that's commonly overlooked, and you might come to realize that once you actually give your basil a little bit of relief from like that midday, afternoon, really hot sun, you'll start to see it thrive a little bit better. So whenever your plant is about 6 to 8 inches tall, you can go ahead and start pruning and harvesting your basil leaves. Cut or just pinch your basil leaves right off to harvest them, and then you can also cut the topmost branches, and that's going to encourage a taller plant overall. Pinch off any blooms to prevent your basil from producing seeds as well. I love that basil is a quick growing plant, so from seed to harvest it can be done in about 3 to 4 weeks. So you're just going to simply harvest evenly around the whole plant. The utmost branches is a great place to begin, like I said, where you just snip where two large leaves meet, but also on the sides a little bit where the plants and stems are a little bit longer. You do kind of want to do an even harvesting around, and that's what's going to ensure more growth from your plant. If you harvest it, it will continue to grow, and that's also why you don't really need to worry about fertilizing your basil. I know some people kind of overcomplicate things, but you really don't need to fertilize basil because you're harvesting it so often. Okay, so we're gonna move on now to soil selection. This is my go-to for basil and for a lot of container herbs that I have because of the organic matter that's in it. If you have any compost, that'd be a great idea to mix maybe a handful or two in, depending on the size of your pot. You just really want a rich, well-draining soil with a pH of 6 to 7. If you read the description on the soil, it'll usually tell you what the pH is, and mostly just that you have a really well draining soil. And organic is best because of the extra matter that they tend to put in that's going to give nutrients to your plants. Now, for the sake of just harvesting this basil, I've got a smaller plant to kind of begin with, and you're going to see how I tear apart the root ball. So you can see where the stems go into the root ball there, and you're just going to kind of, gently work your finger in and kind of gently pry apart, and the roots will start to pull apart a little bit. And you do want to do it gently and intentional, but you'll see where the clusters just come apart pretty easily. Now, depending on how many stems you have rooted down into your root ball is how many times you can transplant this and separate it into however many basil plants that you want. I got quite a few from this, and I'm going to put them in some smaller containers. Now, if you have a larger container, it's a great idea to give your basil as much room to grow. I had these small ones, and I just, I had plans to have some inside and some outside, and it's just what I had, so I used the smaller ones. If you have smaller ones, it's fine. It just means that they're going to dry out a little bit quicker, so you want to keep an eye on it and make sure to water it. You want the soil to stay moist, but not overwatered, so just remember that. So in the bottom of these containers, I always add a little something. It could be bigger rocks, it could be a couple pine cones, but just something to kind of help them drain better and to not have dirt that's going to be spilling out the bottom. Then you put in your soil, you create a little well, and you're going to go ahead and put your basil in, and then backfill it with soil almost to the bottom leaves. Give yourself about an inch, and you want to pack it in just a little bit, and then at the end you'll see I'm going to water it in as well. And that's really it. These are going to be transplanted. Like I said, you do not need any fertilizer. If you want to look into that and you really want to fertilize your basil, you can do so. But if you are planning to harvest these often, you're not going to need a fertilizer. So you simply harvest them and they're going to grow back. You can also have, one of these smaller containers in a window sill in your kitchen and put them on a little saucer, like a terracotta saucer, or a plate with a little bit of water in it, and that's a really good low maintenance way to have some basil ready always in the kitchen to pinch off, especially since it's sweet basil. That's the more common type of basil that you see in pastas and, adding on top of pizzas and things like that. So like I said, just make sure to keep your soil moist. So a little bit is going to come into play with that, how big your container is, where you live. If you're in the southwest region, you might want to water it a little bit more often. You're just going to, stick your finger in the soil and make sure it's not dry. Just kind of keep it moist. So that could be every 2 days, could be every 3 days, could be possibly every day. In the morning is the best time to water your basil, just so you know. And basil is great because you can use it right off of the plant. You can also store it in vinegar. If you want to preserve it, you can freeze it. And if you have like a stem that you cut off, it can also last for a few days in water in the refrigerator as well. So those are a few ways that you can preserve your basil after you've harvested it. So those are the basics and really all you need to know to have a successful basil plant growing whenever you've bought one and you want to transplant it, and you also want to break apart the root ball to make a few more plants. So if your basil starts to flower, then that's going to take away from the basil flavor, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure you harvest it before it buds or has any flowers. And if that does happen, all you have to do is pick off the part with the flower on it, and then the basil flavor will return in a couple of days. So really, as long as you have the basics down of how to take care of your basil, you're going to be successful. And it's a wonderful herb that keeps on giving. So all of these basil plants did wonderful. They thrived really well, and I was able to harvest a lot of basil from them. I froze some. I like to freeze them like chopped up, and I'll put them in either water or a little bit of olive oil in some ice cubes, and that's a really easy and convenient way to have some basil ready to go. You can just throw it in a skillet or throw it in a pot of spaghetti, and it's ready to go. So thank y'all for watching. I have some more plant care videos, DIYs, and definitely some amazing quick and easy curated recipe videos, so check that out.